Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Luca, but also Nick and the ECBC team. Of course, it's our pleasure to act as your hosts today, and we've been very gladly taking that opportunity. I'd like to extend a compliment, of course, to the team. You've been, and hearing David's concerns about regulation stifling innovation, that's surely a topic. But it's being addressed, and that's very valuable. So you're doing a great job in pushing a liberal and free market agenda, and for bringing the global covered bond industry together. And this event is a great testimony again. So thank you very much for letting us be associated with this. Of course, for DZ, Düsseldorf is a special location. As many of you know, we've merged together with our sister institution, WGZ, to now form the third biggest bank in Germany, and we're very happy that we've done so for both institutions out of a position of strength and profitability. Not completely usual in the banking industry these days, so we're very happy about that. And we are equally happy that we maintain one of the best ratings in the banking industry to support the future business that we'll be having together. Now, yes, it is, it's these strange things, Luca, where suddenly there's a German talking on Brexit. And indeed, I was being asked yesterday by two people, Fritz, you have no relevant special knowledge about the topic. Why do you speak on Brexit? And of course, I couldn't think of a good comeback line. So you sleep over it, and I guess the right reply is, well, the people that did run both the Brexit and Remain campaigns in the UK did not seem to possess any special relevant knowledge about the topic either. So we're sort of keeping the consistency here. But having said that, of course, I would like to, after we've gone through the facts and the presentation, I'd like to give the floor to Tim to let an insider speak as well on the topic. And he'll take a few more minutes out of your precious lunchtime. But I think it's worthwhile listening to what he has to say, not only being a senior banker for a very long time and running big parts of ICMA, but also being involved in the political process in the UK. That should be a valuable addition. Now, we've called this presentation here a collection of conjectures, and that really is what it is at the moment. It's not so much about covered bonds post-Brexit, because post-Brexit will mean 2 to 3, maybe longer years to come. So this is more a presentation about covered bonds post the Brexit referendum. And I think that's an important distinction. And what it drives on is, of course, the distinction between risk and uncertainty. To talk about Brexit in terms of risk seems fundamentally flawed because we don't have any historic data. There's nothing to model from. Well, basically, this is a completely unknown. And so we have to talk about uncertainty when we try and tackle the issues ahead of us. So the agenda for this short presentation shall be that, well, we'll see that UK covered bonds are currently again outperforming the market, coming from a wider spread level, and they're likely continuing to outperform, despite, second point, the material uncertainties from Brexit, because of A, a continued central bank support, and B, a net negative supply anticipated for the immediate and medium-term future. So that's going to be the factual bit. And then there's a little bit more of a philosophical European bit that I've added, and I'm sure you'll allow me to say some of those points here. There is, in our view, a definite need to change the debate culture that we're using to engage with political opponents or people of different opinion to prevent Europe from disintegrating further. You will find much of the factual bit in your conference pack, because there's an article from my cover bond analyst colleague Günther Scheppler in there. I should also mention that he's been instrumental in putting this together. So all the good ideas and all the inspiration is his, and the mistakes are mine. So let's look at the first bit, which is it's a very simple chart that many of you will be familiar with. So we'll have these sort of three areas. Before March, UK cover bonds were trading in line with Norway, which makes a lot of sense given the regulatory background of the asset class in the UK. And then when Brexit started to become a concern, the UK cover bonds, which is the blue line, started to move out towards New Zealand, which is the orange line. And then when the referendum surprised everyone by actually suggesting the Brexit, of course, the spreads shot out, and we've seen that they are coming back in again. So we will expect that to continue for the main reason that trading above Australia for the UK, Australia being non-ECB eligible, level 2A and risk-weighted 20, is not a likely scenario going into Brexit negotiations. So let's look at the uncertainties, and we'll start with precisely the regulatory treatment that we anticipate for UK cover bonds. This seems to be relatively clear. We have scenario one, which is status quo. The UK stays in the EEA by some very powerful and sympathetic negotiations between the UK people and the Europeans. That would mean, of course, ECB eligibility remains, risk-weighted 10, and a level 1 asset. Peer group here is Norway. We've seen that that was the logic that applied until March when trading the asset class. Now, the scenario 2 is our more likely case. That's our base case. UK, after Brexit is completed, does not enter the EEA. That would mean ECB eligibility under the current rules of the ECB remain, but the cover bonds move to a risk weighting 20 regime, and the level 1 turns to a level 2A, and that's precisely the peer group Canada is in. And that's what we believe the future is going to look like for the asset class. Now, bearing in mind that they now trade wider than Australia, there is room for improvement in the spreads. Another source of uncertainty is, of course, the enforceability of legal titles in resolution cases. I'm not going to talk a lot about that because I have no affinity to the legal world. But you know, at the moment, when you're a UK covered bond, when you've bought a UK covered bond, that isn't a huge problem because your legal title you'll have to get in the UK at a UK court under UK law. So that's pretty much straightforward, and all the covered bond infrastructure around the bonds is going to be also subject to UK law. Now, it's going to be more of a problem. Oh, you're smiling, Richard. I'm not going to ask you to... English law, sorry. I wasn't aware that there was a... So English law, please, ladies and gentlemen. But for European cover bonds that are subject to the BRRD, there may be a legal title that you get as an investor. However, part of the cover bond infrastructure may still be subject to English law. So imagine the case of Holland, where much of the swaps would be subject to English law, and that legal title may not be enforceable post-Brexit because the necessary legal infrastructure isn't there. So that is more a risk for the European cover bonds rather than for the UK cover bonds. So, and then of course, the next and probably biggest worry is the economic development impact that Brexit may take upon the UK and upon Europe, we should also add. And that would filter through the bank ratings deteriorating, so you may expect there is some justification in spreads of UK cover bonds trading wider than the European peers. Now, our forecast is pretty clear on what we expect for next year. We do expect next year the UK to enter into a slight recession, but that recession will not be enough to trigger any serious movements in bank ratings and therefore worries about UK cover bonds. And of course, the market being compressed by QE as it is, here Brexit sort of seems to be reinforcing that. When you listened to Draghi's statements on Thursday, he clearly said, well, yes, I mean, the Brexit does not doesn't create additional inflation for sure. Rather, on the contrary, because it is detrimental to the economic development, and thereby it is invoking deflationary effects. So, of course, in consequence, that means a reinforced need for QE, and of course, the decision is out whether CBPP3 will be continued beyond April next year, but Brexit may further that course rather than hinder it. And of course, in England itself, the reaction was very swift. The Bank of England introducing most importantly, the TFS, 4-year liquidity. For the next 18 months, the UK banks can go to the Bank of England and get 4-year liquidity for, depending on what the balance sheet dynamics are, 0 and 25 basis points. So that should drive out some supply. And the overall supply picture that we're seeing in the UK, not only being subject to the TFS that I've just mentioned, but also, of course, other regulation like TLAC and MREL impact the issuance pattern in the cover bond space with the UK, because if you need to issue TLAC or Tier 2 for MREL reasons, this is also liquidity, and it will dampen the new supply of cover bonds from the UK. Redemptions next year will be 21 billion, and we definitely do not expect those redemptions to be fully replaced in the market by the issuers. So that's been the factual bit. There's little more we can say at this point about spread movements, and as I mentioned, it is a lot of conjecture. But I would like to move to a point that is very close to our hearts, because we can see it in the domestic context in Germany between AfD and established parties. I'm sure in France you have a similar state of play between Front National and the other established parties. But we've seen it between the Brexit and the Remain camps in the UK context as well. And it seems to be that the political culture and the way we interact with each other is subject to 3 very dangerous misconceptions. 1, we treat facts as being ambiguous. A German talk show host yesterday was foolish enough to say that, well, you know, emotions are facts as well. No, they're not facts. They're precisely not facts. And it's not because somebody, we've seen that discussion in the US, is feeling that the crime rate's gone up. There should be the policymakers should take a political step addressing that issue, because you have to look at the fact, and the fact tells you the crime rate hasn't gone up. It's gone down consistently for the last 10 years. So if we confuse those 2 things, we are in deep trouble, because we're going to make the wrong policy decisions. Facts are unambiguous. The second misconception is that an argument is about winning. Well, an argument isn't about winning. An argument is about learning. And if we don't listen to each other, then we will, because we just try to win the argument, then we will not improve the state of affairs in the real world. And then the third one, and I'm guilty here as charged, is confirmation bias. So can I have a show of hands? Who thinks in this audience that the Brexit is ultimately beneficial to the UK? Thank you. Oh, 2 people. Very good. Thank you very much. 3. David, wonderful. Yes, thank you. So a couple, 4. Now, who thinks that Brexit is ultimately bad for the UK? That's the vast majority. Now, I would be on your side here, but if we talk amongst each other, we won't learn anything. It will be a nice conversation. It will be amicable. It's a bit like singing a song together. But we won't learn anything. So I would definitely urge you to remember those people who've put their hand up and said, no, actually, Brexit may very well be beneficial to the UK, and talk to them, because then both sides can learn something. So, and that needs to filter through into the political realm as well. If it doesn't, then Brexit is only the start of the political disintegration of Europe. And there is a clear danger here, from recent statements that I've read from senior EU officials, that Brexit is treated as a singular event. Oh, it's a British problem. Oh, it's the fault of Cameron and in-party fighting in the Conservatives and that one. But that doesn't do it justice. And if we just treat it like that, we're definitely on a very slippery slope here. So we need a renovation of the EU and as an answer to Brexit. And only that renovation actually curbs the risk of the need to punish the UK for leaving in order to keep everybody else in. Right? If we change the EU, then we can actually start a constructive discussion around the UK leaving without having to fear that it's all going to bits. I'm going to leave you with those 2 quotes. Love is not a notion that bankers entertain, of course, so please replace it with empathy if you like. It makes exactly the same sense. And of course, I couldn't resist in putting Milton Friedman on with bureaucracy has no means of restraining itself. So far, thank you very much for your attention.